Claire sat in her car with the engine off, the soft hum of music from the wedding hall drifting through the open window. Laughter spilled out, the kind of bright, careless laughter that only belonged to people who felt secure in their joy. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. From where she sat, she could see flashes of lights, decorations, and the silhouettes of guests moving in and out of the grand glass door. It was her sister's wedding, Caroline's wedding. The words didn't even feel real in her head. She hadn't known about it until a friend texted her earlier that day, asking why she wasn't there. At first, Claire thought it was some kind of mistake, a prank maybe. But the photos and live videos online left no room for doubt. Her twin sister was walking down the aisle in a gown that must have cost more than Claire's car. Her chest burned as if the air itself had turned sharp. She felt like an outsider looking in on a life she was supposed to be part of, but never invited to. The truth came like a knife when her friend finally called her. "Claire, I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but your parents used the wedding fund. The one they promised you. They used it for Caroline's wedding." The phone had slipped in her hand, her mind reeling. That money wasn't just numbers in a bank. It was years of promises, whispered assurances from her parents that when her day came, she would have the celebration she deserved. Claire had never asked for much, had never demanded anything extravagant. But knowing that her parents had set something aside for her future had been a comfort, a rare thread of fairness in a family where Caroline always seemed to shine brighter. Now that thread was gone, cut clean without her even knowing. Claire blinked hard, her eyes blurring with tears. She thought of Michael, her fiancé, who had been saving every spare dollar from his long hours at work. The fund had meant they could meet in the middle, building a wedding together that reflected both their love and their effort. Without it, everything would fall on his shoulders, or disappear completely. A wave of humiliation swept over her. Not only had her parents betrayed her, they had done it so publicly. Caroline was glowing inside that hall, dressed in Claire's stolen dreams, while guests toasted to happiness built on her silence. She felt sick. Her own family hadn't even told her. Not a word. Claire's reflection in the car window looked like a stranger. Red eyes, trembling lips, a young woman whose trust had just been shattered. For years, she had pushed aside the small cuts of favoritism, told herself it didn't matter that Caroline was the chosen one. But this was too much. This was her future. Her chest tightened as another round of applause thundered from the hall. She swallowed hard, the question twisting inside her. Would she confront them tonight? Or would she drive away, carrying this wound like every other, in silence? She didn't know yet. But she did know one thing. Nothing would ever be the same. Claire had always been the steady one. Growing up, she was the child who remembered to do her homework, the one who helped clean the kitchen without being asked, the one who stayed up late studying so her grades would never slip. Teachers called her dependable, and neighbors praised her for being polite and thoughtful. Her parents nodded along with those compliments, but they never looked at her with the same kind of pride they saved for Caroline. Caroline was different from the start. She had a laugh that filled every room, the kind of laugh people wanted to be around. She was bold, charming, and reckless in a way that somehow never cost her anything. If Claire was the careful twin, Caroline was the shining star. She broke rules, skipped classes, and still managed to be forgiven. Their parents called her spirited, as if her recklessness was a special gift instead of a problem. Claire noticed the difference in how they were treated early on. When Caroline came home with a failing grade, their mother sighed and said, "She'll figure it out. She just needs encouragement." But if Claire brought home a B instead of an A, her father frowned and reminded her that she could do better. She had to set an example. It wasn't just school. Birthdays, holidays, family gathering. Caroline was always at the center, the one chosen to make the speech, the one dressed in the gown their mother had spent weeks picking out. Claire was there too, of course, smiling in the background, holding the camera, making sure everything went smoothly. She became the dependable twin, the one her parents leaned on when they needed responsibility, but overlooked when it came to celebration. As they grew older, the gap only widened. Caroline dated recklessly, often crying in the middle of the night after another breakup, and Claire would sit with her, offering tissues and gentle advice. Their parents rushed to comfort Caroline, scolding the boys who hurt her. When Claire quietly started dating Michael, a kind man she had met through work, her parents barely noticed. Michael saw what they didn't. He noticed how Claire always put others first, how she stayed late at work to help her boss, how she kept promises even when it cost her sleep and energy. He loved her for her steady heart and quiet strength. "You're the glue that holds everything together," he once told her, cupping her cheek in his hand. They built their relationship slowly, carefully. Michael wasn't wealthy, but he was hardworking. He worked long shifts and picked up extra hours, tucking money away for their future. When he proposed, it wasn't in a flashy way. just the two of them in the park where they often walked, his hands shaking as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Claire said yes with tears in her eyes, not because of the size of the diamond, but because of the love she felt radiating. The family fund for her wedding had always been a promise, something her parents mentioned often in passing. "When it's your turn, you won't have to worry," her mother had said. "We want to make sure both our girls have beautiful weddings." It wasn't something Claire counted on completely, but it gave her comfort. Michael was saving what he could, and the fund meant they could meet in the middle and have the kind of wedding they both dreamed of, not extravagant, just enough to celebrate their love with dignity. But deep down, Claire knew how her parents operated. She had seen, year after year, how their choices always bent toward Caroline. She remembered when Caroline wanted to study abroad for a semester. Their parents emptied part of their savings to make it happen, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When Claire later asked for help paying for graduate school, her father shook his head and said, "You're responsible, Claire. You'll figure it out on your own." That was her role, the one who figured it out, the one who didn't need help, the one who could always manage without attention or praise. She had accepted it for most of her life, swallowing the sting and telling herself that being the reliable one was its own kind of strength. But marriage was different. This was supposed to be her moment, her chance to stand in the center instead of the sideline. She had imagined walking down the aisle with her parents beaming at her, imagined a celebration where she was not the shadow of her twin, but the bride in her own right. Now, without the fund, that dream felt like it had been ripped away before it even began. She thought about Michael's tired face after his late shifts, the way he kept counting every dollar, determined to give her the best he could. The fund wasn't just money. It was the promise that her parents would, for once, treat her as someone worth celebrating. By giving it to Caroline instead, they had sent a message louder than words. To them, Claire was still the backup plan, the dependable one who didn't need help, who didn't deserve the spotlight. And now she had to face the truth. Without that fund, her dream wedding was slipping out of reach. And worse, the wound wasn't about flowers, dresses, or music. It was about years of being unseen, years of being told without words that her worth was less than her sister's. Claire didn't wait long after learning the truth. Her hands shook the whole drive to her parents' house, the anger and hurt boiling inside her like a storm she couldn't hold back any. She had practiced the words in her head, but when she pulled into their driveway, all she felt was the sting of betrayal pressing down on her chest. Her mother opened the door with a smile, surprised to see her. "Claire, sweetheart, what a surprise. Come in." Claire stepped inside without returning the smile. "Why didn't you tell me about Caroline's wedding?" Her voice was sharp, trembling with the effort to keep from breaking down. Her mother's face shifted, guilt flickering for a moment before she forced a calm expression. "Oh, honey, it all happened so fast. They wanted to do it quickly, and we couldn't delay. You used my wedding fund." Claire's words cut through the air like glass shattering. "The money you promised me, you used it for her." Her father walked into the room, his tone already defensive. "Claire, you need to understand. Caroline's fiancé comes from a wealthy family. They expect a certain kind of wedding. We couldn't embarrass ourselves by not contributing." Claire blinked at him, disbelief twisting her stomach. "So you embarrassed me instead? You took what you promised me and gave it to her without even telling me. Do you know how humiliating that is? I found out from a friend, not from my own parents." Her mother reached for her arm, but Claire stepped back. "We didn't mean to hurt you. It's just, Caroline needed it more urgently. You and Michael are practical. You'll figure things out. You always do." The words landed like a slap. Always her role, the one who didn't need, the one who figured it out. She felt the years of favoritism crashing down on her all at once. "So because I'm responsible, I don't matter? Because I don't throw tantrums or demand attention, you think it's fine to take from me and give to her?" Her father's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. This is family. Caroline's wedding was a priority. Yours will happen eventually, and we'll find a way to support you then." "Eventually?" Claire's voice cracked. "You already gave away what was mine. What else do you have left for me?" "Nothing. You've made it clear that Caroline will always come first." Michael, who had followed her into the house quietly, finally spoke up. His voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "With all respect, this isn't about money. It's about respect. You promised Claire something important, and instead of honoring that, you hid it and treated her like she doesn't matter. That's not family." Her mother looked flustered. "Michael, you don't understand. We couldn't afford to look small in front of Caroline's in-law. Their family has money, influence." Claire interrupted, her voice rising, tears burning her eyes. "So you sold me out for appearances? You cared more about impressing strangers than honoring your own daughter." The room went silent. Her parents didn't answer, and their silence told her everything she needed to know. She had spent her whole life trying to earn their approval, waiting for the day they would see her as more than the backup twin. But now she understood, they never would. She shook her head slowly, the pain hardening into something sharper. "I'm done. I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt. You've shown me exactly where I stand. Her mother's voice cracked, desperate now. Claire, please, don't turn this into a scene. We'll fix it, we'll talk later. No, Claire said firmly, her voice steady for the first time that night. You already made your choice. You chose Caroline. You always have. Michael placed a hand on her back as she turned toward the door. She didn't look back, even as her mother called her name. The weight of years pressed on her shoulders, but for once, she didn't swallow the pain. She let it burn. Outside in the cool night air, she finally let the tears fall. Michael pulled her into his arms, holding her while she shook. But even through the comfort, she knew this wasn't something a hug could fix. This wasn't about a wedding or a fund. It was about her worth, and how her own parents had made it clear she would never be enough in their eyes. As she sat in the passenger seat of Michael's car, staring out at the dark streets, she whispered to herself, I can't go back to who I was before tonight. And she knew it was true. Something had broken, and there was no way to piece it back together. The days after the confrontation felt heavy, like Claire was walking through fog. She ignored her parents' calls at first, letting the phone buzz on the nightstand until it went silent. The messages piled up, short, clipped notes from her father, longer guilt-filled ones from her mother. Claire, please call us back. We didn't mean for this to come between us. You have to understand, it was an urgent situation. Don't embarrass us by making this public. That last line stuck in her chest. They weren't worried about her pain. They were worried about appearances. Caroline, on the other hand, wasn't shy. She flooded social media with photos of her wedding, every detail polished and extravagant. Videos of her walking down the aisle, her first dance, the fireworks at the end of the night. Claire tried not to look, but it was impossible to avoid when mutual friends kept posting and tagging. Each image was a reminder of what had been stolen from her. One afternoon, Caroline called her directly. Claire stared at the phone before answering, her voice flat. What do you want? Caroline laughed on the other end, her tone dripping with smugness. You're still upset? Claire, it's just money. Don't tell me you're really going to ruin our relationship over this. Our relationship? Claire snapped. You mean the one where you take and I lose? Caroline sighed dramatically. You're jealous. That's what this is. You've always been jealous, and now it's showing. I didn't force Mom and Dad to give me the money. They offered because they knew I needed it. You needed it? Claire's voice shook with anger. You've never needed anything. They've always handed you everything while I worked for mine. And now they've taken what was promised to me and given it to you. How do you not see how wrong that is? But Caroline didn't answer. She only muttered, You've always been dramatic, before hanging up. Claire sat frozen, phone pressed to her ear, anger giving way to a sharp sting of doubt. Was she being dramatic? Was she wrong to feel so betrayed? Maybe her parents had been right. Caroline's wedding had been urgent. Maybe she should just accept it and move on. But every time she tried to convince herself, her stomach twisted. No, this wasn't jealousy. This was betrayal. Michael noticed how she spiraled. At night, when she stared at the ceiling in silence, he pulled her close. Claire, he said softly, we don't need their money. We'll save on our own. It might not be fancy, but it'll be ours. Isn't that enough? She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go and focus only on the love they shared. But the injustice clung to her like a weight. It's not about the money, Michael, she whispered. It's about the fact that they didn't even think twice about taking it from me. It's about knowing that no matter what I do, I'll never be enough for them. Michael kissed the top of her head. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to be. His words made sense, but her heart refused to accept them. These were her parents. She couldn't just cut the cord, even if they had hurt her more deeply than anyone else ever could. The isolation grew. Family friends started reaching out, confused about why Claire hadn't been at the wedding. Some asked bluntly, Were you sick? Did something happen? She avoided answering, too ashamed to admit the truth. She knew her parents were probably spinning their own version of the story, painting her as oversensitive, maybe even ungrateful. Every day felt like a battle between rage and guilt. Rage for the betrayal, guilt for even daring to be angry at her own parent. She replayed the confrontation in her head, wondering if she had said too much, wondering if she had gone too far. But then she remembered the look on her father's face, cold and dismissive, and the guilt cracked apart again. Weeks passed like this, until one evening her phone rang again. This time it was her father. His voice was firm, leaving no space for argument. Claire, your mother and I want you to come to dinner. This has gone on long enough. It's time to put this behind us. Claire's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't want to sit across from them, pretending everything was fine. But her father continued, The family will be there. Your aunts, uncles, cousins. It's important you come. Don't make things harder than they need to be. The words hit her like a threat wrapped in politeness. She knew what this was. They wanted her to fall in line, to smile and nod so no one would suspect anything was wrong. When she hung up, Michael looked at her worriedly. You don't have to go, he said. But Claire shook her head slowly. I think I do. Not for them, for me. I need to see them again and know if there's anything left to save, or if this is really the end. The night of the dinner arrived, and Claire's stomach churned the entire drive. Michael squeezed her hand, grounding her. She tried to imagine what awaited her inside. Her mother's fake smiles, her father's stiff authority, Caroline's smug glances. She felt like she was walking into an ambush, her parents expecting her to bury her pain for the sake of family image. But something inside her had changed since that night in the driveway. She was still hurt, still unsure of herself, but she wasn't willing to be silenced anymore. As she reached the door, Claire took a deep breath. This dinner would not heal the wound. She knew that already, but it would show her the truth of who her parents really were, and whether she was ready to finally let go of the family she had spent her whole life trying to please. The dinner started just the way Claire expected. Her mother greeted her with an overbright smile, as if nothing had ever happened. "Claire, darling, so glad you came," she said, pulling her into a hug that felt more like a performance than affection. Her father stood by the dining table, tall and serious, nodding stiffly. "Let's not make tonight difficult," he muttered under his breath as she passed. The long table was filled with relatives, her aunts, uncles, cousins, even family friends. Plates of food covered the table, laughter echoed, but Claire felt none of it. Caroline sat across from her, radiant in a new designer dress, her wedding ring flashing under the light. She smirked the moment their eyes met. Throughout the meal, her parents kept steering the conversation away from anything uncomfortable. They talked about Caroline's honeymoon, about her husband's family, about work and neighbors. Not once did they mention Claire's engagement. It was like she wasn't even a bride-to-be, just a guest at her own family's table. Finally, her father raised his glass. "Family is everything," he said with a firm smile. "No matter what happens, we stick together. We forgive, we move forward." The words scraped at Claire's chest. Forgive. Move forward. As if she was the problem. As if her silence was the solution. Something inside her snapped. She pushed back her chair, the scrape of wood against the floor making the whole room fall silent. Her hands shook, but her voice came out strong. "No, we're not going to pretend everything is fine. Not tonight." All eyes turned to her. Her mother's face froze, her father's jaw clenched. "Claire, sit down," he ordered. But she didn't. "Everyone here deserves to know the truth. For years, I've been the quiet one, the responsible one, the twin who never needed anything. And for years, I've been treated like I don't matter. But what happened with Caroline's wedding fund was the last straw." Murmurs rippled around the table. One of her uncles frowned. "What do you mean, Claire?" She looked straight at her parents. "They promised me money for my wedding. They told me they had saved it for me for years. And when Caroline decided she wanted an extravagant wedding, they gave it all to her instead, without even telling me. I had to find out from a friend." Gasps echoed. Caroline rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't make this dramatic. They just helped me first. You'll get your turn eventually." Claire laughed bitterly. "That's what they always say, that I'll get my turn. But I never do." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, scrolling to the files she had saved. Her mother's eyes widened. "Claire, what are you doing?" Her father's voice grew sharp. "Turn that off." But Claire didn't listen. She pressed play. The room filled with her parents' voices, words she had secretly recorded weeks earlier when they thought she wasn't listening. Her mother's voice was clear. "Caroline needs the fund more urgently. Claire will figure it out, she always does." Then her father. "We can't embarrass ourselves in front of Caroline's in-law. Claire's wedding can wait." And finally, Caroline's smug laugh. "Claire doesn't care about things like that. She's not like me. She'll be fine." The voices echoed around the table, sharp and undeniable. Gasps and whispers erupted as relatives exchanged shocked looks. Her mother's face turned pale. "Claire, how dare you?" Her father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! Turn that off right now." But Michael stood, his voice steady. "No, everyone needs to hear this. Claire deserves to be heard, maybe for the first time in her life." He placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her trembling frame. Claire looked around the table, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you see now? This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about money. This is about years of being invisible, years of being told I don't matter while Caroline gets everything handed to her. And when I finally had something promised to me, it was taken without a second thought." Silence followed her words, heavy and uncomfortable. Her aunts looked horrified. Her cousins avoided eye contact. Someone muttered, "That's not right." Her parents tried to recover, but the damage was done. Their polished image of fairness and unity was shattered in front of everyone they cared about. Her father's voice shook with anger. "You're humiliating this family." Claire wiped her tears and lifted her chin. "No, you humiliated me. You betrayed me. And I won't be silent anymore." Michael pulled her closer, his presence grounding her as her parents struggled to regain control of the moment. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. For the first time in her life, Claire felt something break free inside her. the weight of silence, the endless need for approval. She didn't need their validation anymore. She had spoken her truth, and nothing could take it back. Her parents stared at her, their power cracked, their control slipping. And Claire finally realized she wasn't the weak one in the family. She was the strong one, the one brave enough to break the cycle. The days after the dinner felt strangely quiet. Claire expected to feel crushed by what had happened, but instead she felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally been set down. For the first time, she had spoken the truth out loud, and everyone had heard it. The silence from her parents afterward was telling. They hadn't called, hadn't written, hadn't tried to fix things. And maybe that was the clearest answer she could have asked for. She didn't hate them. That surprised her. She thought she might after everything. But instead, there was only a calm acceptance. Her parents had chosen Caroline again and again, and now she was choosing herself. That wasn't bitterness, it was freedom. Michael supported her through it all. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, he said gently, "We don't need them to move forward, Claire. We can build our life our way." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt warmth spread through her chest. He had stood beside her when no one else would, never doubting her worth. She smiled softly. "Then let's do it. Let's plan a wedding that's ours, even if it's simple." They began making plans, not for a lavish celebration, but for something that felt true. A small ceremony in a garden, with their closest friends, with music played by a friend's guitar instead of a full orchestra. They chose homemade decorations, food cooked by people who cared about them, and a dress that Claire picked not for a price tag, but because it made her feel beautiful. Each choice felt like a step away from the shadow of her family and toward something real. But planning the wedding wasn't the only step Claire took. She also reached out for help she had long avoided. She found a therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes who listened without judgment. For the first time, Claire began to speak about the years of favoritism, the countless times she had swallowed her pain to keep the peace, the way she had grown up believing she had to earn her worth. Session by session, she peeled back those old wounds. It hurt, but it was healing. She learned that her parents' favoritism wasn't her fault, that nothing she could have done would have made them see her different. She began to understand that she had spent years living in Caroline's shadow, measuring herself against someone who was never meant to be her yardstick. Slowly, she started to see herself in a new light, not as the other twin, not as the dependable daughter who never needed anything, but as Claire, a woman with her own strength, her own voice, her own life. Michael noticed the change. One morning, as she laughed while helping him make pancakes in their tiny kitchen, he kissed her forehead. "You're glowing," he said. She smiled. It was true. She felt lighter now, freer. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for her parents' approval. She wasn't hoping they'd finally choose her. She had chosen herself. The wedding came together piece by piece, not grand but full of love. Friends offered to help, bringing flowers from their gardens, lending chairs and tables, creating music playlists. Claire felt surrounded not by people who were bound to her by blood, but by people who truly cared for her happiness. Her parents didn't reach out, not once, and she stopped expecting them to. Caroline posted endlessly about her perfect married life, but the sting of comparison had faded. Claire no longer needed to measure herself against her sister's work. On a quiet night before bed, Claire wrote in her journal, a practice her therapist had encouraged. She wrote, "For so long, I thought family meant loyalty, no matter how much it hurt. But I've learned that love is what makes a family, not blood. And I've learned that I deserve love, respect, and joy, even if it doesn't come from the people who raised me." She closed the journal and felt at peace. Her story wasn't about what she had lost anymore. It was about what she was building. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to step forward without looking back. The garden was small, nothing like the glittering hall where Caroline had celebrated her wedding, but to Claire it felt perfect. Strings of soft lights hung between the trees, flowers lined the aisle, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in gold. The air carried the sound of quiet music, played by a friend's guitar. As Claire took her first step down the aisle, her heart swelled. The faces that turned toward her weren't distant relatives waiting to gossip, or parents demanding she smile for appearances. They were friends, chosen family, people who had stood beside her when she had been at her lowest. Their smiles were real, their joy unforced. Michael stood at the end of the aisle, his eyes fixed on her with a love so steady it made her breath catch. He wasn't looking at her dress, or the flowers, or the setting. He was looking at her, as if she was the only thing that mattered in the world. Tears stung her eyes, but they were different from the ones she had cried outside her sister's wedding hall. These were tears of release, of peace. She no longer carried the weight of being unseen, unloved, or second best. She was walking into a new chapter built on truth, not pretense. As her feet touched the grass aisle, Claire thought about her parents, about Caroline. For the first time, the thought didn't cut her open. She had lost them, yes, but in losing them she had found something greater. She had found her own strength, her own worth, and the kind of love that wasn't conditional. When she reached Michael and placed her hands in his, she felt a quiet certainty settle inside her. Family wasn't about blood, not really. Blood may tie us, she thought, but love, real love, is what makes a family. Hey besties. Thanks for staying till the end of this emotional story. Imagine saving for your dream wedding, only to have your parents give it all to your twin, and then expect you to just understand. Painful, right? But sometimes heartbreak teaches us strength and self-worth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.